everyone, and welcome to the next episode of L'Exclusive, the podcast hosted by PaperStreet Web Design and Marketing. As always, I'm your host, Nancy, the Client Relations Manager here at PaperStreet, and today I'm once again joined by our Content Director, Allison. Hey, Allison, glad you're with us again today.
Good morning, everyone. Glad to be here.
For today, we're doing a bit of a meta topic. Meta, not like Facebook. Meta as in we're talking about how to start your own podcast. So we're a podcast talking about how to start a podcast. Hopefully you'll find this one pretty interesting. And we create kind of like a timeline and a process flow for how you can get this started. And it really isn't that big a deal. And a lot of times when I'm presenting to my clients, like, why do you need a podcast? And really, the biggest thing for podcasts is it's a great branding and reputation builder. You can get yourself out there in a way that puts you as the face of your own law firm. So someone will be able to connect with who you are. You'll be able to talk about legal matters that you are an expert in. So you'll be able to demonstrate your authority. And you'll be able to reach people and other clients who may not have found you any other way. In reality, podcasts are a very big deal. They're still growing in popularity, with at this point the statistics saying over 420 million people are listening to podcasts. And at this point, 65% of law firms have a podcast. So even though it may not seem like your competitors have them at this point, they may, and they're just not promoting them properly. But it even goes further than that. Of that 65% of law firms that have a podcast, 36% of law firms have multiple podcasts. So if that number has changed so drastically in the past few years, it's likely to increase even more. So not only is this podcast opportunity a great chance for you to grow your expertise, promote yourself, talk about your firm, gain listeners and potential clients, but it also means that you may need to stay relevant to keep up with your competitors. Now, this is especially true for all areas of law. It's not just the personal injury lawyers and the family lawyers and the criminal lawyers who always are seen as being the ones to more need clients. This could even be to those business to business lawyers, your corporate lawyers, your mergers and acquisitions lawyers. Because in reality, your competition may be doing that. And if a general counsel or a business person, someone who's in the know or a decision maker for your potential client, is the type to listen to a podcast, then they may have found their next attorney by that podcast. Even if you have the reputation in the area, they may be willing to try something new. So, for a million reasons, a podcast is really a great way to just simply get yourself on the map. And last but not least, what people don't realize is if you have any interest in SEO, search engine optimization, a podcast is a great way to get your site ranking further because you can take that podcast, you can put it on your site, you can transcribe the podcast and have the written word be part of your blog and things like that. And if people happen to listen to you that way or find you that way, and it has internal links and all of that, then your SEO will grow as well. So your podcast is really one of those things that just has more benefits than downsides to it.
It's also a really fun marketing effort. I think one of the more probably entertaining ones for the person doing it, right? Writing and blogging can be maybe daunting for a lot of people, seem more like a chore. Podcasts are really casual, they're conversational. It's mostly enjoyable to, maybe set aside some time and just talk about obviously what you know best. There's that to consider too. As far as enjoyment factor, I think podcasting is one of the better marketing moves you could make. And it's not hard to get started. So, at PaperStreet, we have a few basic recommendations that you would need to really get off the ground, like $30 in an Amazon order, and you're ready to get started. We prefer Zoom as the recording platform, but you could use anything comparable to that. When you record on Zoom, it allows you to save the file to the cloud or to your desktop, and that file is what any professional could use to basically turn it into, the video and the accompanying soundbite that you need for your podcast. So Zoom is definitely the suggestion. You can do it. It's free for up to 45 minutes, which is our max length recommendation anyway. So no cost there. And then you need to invest in a microphone. We, have producing these for lots of lawyers. We can tell the difference between somebody who's using a computer microphone and someone who just spent a little extra money and got even a basic, kind of setup, something that was able to, that was able to pick up the sound a little bit better. So a quick search on Amazon, you can get something pretty simple there that really makes a huge difference in, the quality of the sound. But also your sound editor, which is really the third kind of thing that you need to make this happen. They can also clean up a lot of the sound as well. We do have some attorneys who, in the background, you drop a cup or a dog barks or the doorbell rings or something, and the right person can kind of like edit that out or at least muffle it a little bit. So, a reputable kind of sound editor, you could use a freelancer for this. There's lots of, great talented people on the internet or an agency. This is part of the service that PaperStreet provides. This person basically would make your little jingle, little intro. Maybe there's a little voiceover happening in the beginning and at the end that kind of ties the whole thing together. And then also, of course, kind of scrubbing and cleaning up the sound. That's really all you need to get started is those, kind of those three bits. I think, a Zoom account, a microphone, and someone to help you basically string all those digital, files together.
And if you have someone helping, like a sound editor or something like that, they can even do a lot of the legwork for you. They could tell you which microphone to get, or even if you have to just adjust the microphone that's on your computer. Like my particular computer actually has an extra enhanced microphone because I talk to clients so often on Zoom. So they'll be the ones to tell you all of that. I mean, obviously, we hope you'll go to PaperStreet and let us help you. But even if you don't, a good sound editor who really knows their stuff can really help you. They can help splice the images. I mean, and we choose to use a video with our Paper Street podcast, so that way you can listen to us on YouTube as well. But you don't have to. So even if you just use the sound files, you still need to invest in a good microphone and a good sound editor to make sure that it does have that high quality. Because don't forget, if somebody found you on Apple or Spotify or one of those big major directories, your competitors probably have really good sound and things like that. So you don't want to come across as amateurish just because your sound quality isn't that great. And somebody who knows their salt can be found on any of those salt sites, Upwork, things like that. And they'll be able to really make sure that your sound is where it needs to be. So then once you have those basics in place, you have the microphone, you have the Zoom, you have your sound editor, what should you do? Do you have a script? Okay. We say yes here at Paper Street. Okay. And even us, we're used to talking. I'm used to doing all of this. And I help out my colleagues when they join me. I create an outline. Okay. It doesn't have to be a word for word script because speech, rather, you don't want to have it come across as if you're reading from a script and it's like an index card that you're talking to your audience. But you should have some sort of flow because for a lot of people, either they get nervous when they're talking or they just kind of get in the zone and they realize that they've gone way off track with their topic. Having some sort of script in front of you is really the best way to make sure that you have something, to just stay on topic. And even it's also great to have a good script outline because if you create this outline, what you can do is you could give it to a friend or anyone else just not in the legal industry to say, hey, do you think this would be a great podcast? Is this talk about the things you'd either want to talk about or listen to or things like that? And that's a great way to see if other people would be interested because that's important to realize. It's all of the lawyers, all of you out there can really create great podcasts, but it may not be what your potential clients need to talk about. So you have to remember that your audience is really what's shaping your script. So when we're telling our clients, either when we're writing it for you or even we're just helping you start your own, think about your clients as your audience and what do you need to do for them. So what we say is always make sure that your topic is something that you can be engaging and informative about. Have something that you can have some passion in your speech about, something that gets you riled up or something you get excited about because when you're excited about something or interested in something, that conveys. People feed off of that. So when you have that enthusiasm, it just runs through. So pick something that you can be engaging and informative about. Think about what do your clients ask you? What is something that you answer a million times that people probably are going to want to hear? And then what do you think your clients need to know? So, for example, people may not realize what should I wear to court? When do I show up for court? What will I be asked in court? Things like that. So, you could create that sort of podcast to kind of create a guideline for what your clients need to know. And if you're not just trying to reach potential clients, you're trying to help your existing clients, you can send that to them. So you can say, hey, your upcoming court date's coming. Here's this podcast you can listen to have in the back of your mind of what you'll need to know and things like that. So think about what your clients need to know. What do they ask about? And then once you've exhausted those topics, or if you find that's too difficult for you to talk about, you can talk about things that are a broader scope. Has the law changed and you want to talk about that? Has something gone on in the news that you feel you could create a great podcast about? One of our securities fraud lawyers, for example, talked about the bank collapse in his podcast. And that was such a relevant topic, and it got listens because people didn't know all that was going on with these banks. What's going on? What is this problem? Is this something I need to be worried about? So that was just a really fantastic show for him because it was in the moment, it's now, and it was something that people could respond to and just grasp. So again, all of that stuff is really relevant. And as a side note, Allison, you can probably chuckle with this, but we talked about this with our blog posts too. So something that could make a really great blog post could also be turned into a great podcast. So you can
Mhm.
always mix and match them. So you could
Definitely.
make a podcast that builds off of one of your blog posts or vice versa. So that way you can always have that double source of information. So at the end of your show, you can be like, and see our site for more or something along those lines. So really the possibilities never end. And then of course, if you can't think of any of these ideas, you yourself can just hire somebody, whether it's PaperStreet or otherwise, to help you formulate what would be great ideas to either expose your brand to other people, to help engage your clients, or just something that'll just make you more interesting.
Some of the questions that we're asked most often are kind of the basics, like, how long, how often do I have to do this? Where should I do this? I think when we're talking about length, Nancy, we tend to be about 20 to 45 minutes. I wouldn't go over 45 minutes. I think that's too long. 20 minutes is definitely enough to get your point across. So somewhere in between there is going to be your sweet spot. And if you're thinking about kind of like an outline we were talking about earlier, you're looking at somewhere between like 6 to 10 bullet points. That's going to land you somewhere in between that 20 to 45-minute kind of script length. And for how often, as a minimum, you need once a month, right? That's a consistent posting, 12 a year, twice a month, even better. And it doesn't have to be, and this is kind of like a pro tip for us, right? It doesn't have to be monthly. You post monthly, but you could set aside a time a few times a year, maybe twice or 3 times a year, and record multiple evergreen topics in one morning. So if you're making them a half an hour each, set aside some morning, brew yourself a cup of coffee, record yourself, 3 times in a row talking about these evergreen topics. Then you're kind of set, and your sound editor, your team, your marketing team can set you up progressively to be done for the next 3 months, giving you kind of like a break, right? It's easier to set aside 3 hours one morning than maybe an hour every morning for, the entire year. And that also kind of frees you up for kind of anything that might happen in the news that's relevant, something that you might want to just hit like pause on everything else and jump in front of the camera again to do a quick podcast, like the breaking news with the bank closures. So it kind of, frees you up for that opportunity too. So I think, 20, 45 minutes, once to twice a month. In terms of where you're recording, the room acoustics do play a little bit in terms of, how the sound's going to be, as well as kind of those distractions we mentioned about the barking dog or the doorbell kind of thing. So, a quiet room with the door shut is, usually ideal. Once you record once or twice, your professional, whoever is, kind of putting everything together for you, will tell you what's not working. They'll be like, you need to sit closer to the computer, or, you need to shut the window, whatever it is that's kind of like, making everything be a little weird. And then one of the most common questions we're asked is video. Do you include the video, right? And I think, Nancy, you'd probably agree with me. I would say, why not? Why wouldn't you? If you're already making the effort to have this conversation and you already have Zoom on, if you leave the video on, it gives you an opportunity to add the material to a different channel. Right now, this is something that could be saved to your YouTube, your Vimeo account, can be re-optimized, it can be embedded into pages on your website. It's just another source of marketing material that's being cut from the same cloth, right? You're already having this conversation. So we are advocates of using the video. I think that's a really great supplement to your marketing strategy with absolutely zero effort, essentially, since we're already talking about the podcast. So those would be kind of our like best practices. Definitely our most commonly asked questions when a firm is considering whether this is a good thing to start.
Yeah, and just piggybacking off of that, the statistic is only 17% of podcasters are using video at this point. So that's a great way to distinguish
Mhm.
yourself as well, because maybe somebody really likes to watch on YouTube. Maybe they prefer that than simply listening to their AirPods or something like that. So if only so few are doing that, while yet 65% of law firms are making these podcasts, that's just a way for you to stand out. Because you got to remember when you're doing anything like this, whatever marketing efforts you're making, not just podcasts, you have to find ways to be different and just to give yourself that edge. And with so few law firms making the video, be the ones that jump ahead of that. So that's really important to keep in mind. And just in terms of what Allison was talking about, in terms of the length of the shows, what you have to realize is that think about what your listeners are doing when they're watching this program. So, like, there are crazy statistics like 50% of podcast listeners happen while they're in the car. And
Yeah.
then another 50% of podcast listeners do it while they're taking a walk. So that's helping you frame how long your episodes should be because, okay, how long does the average person commute to work? How long does the average person take a walk? And some people said they listen to doing their podcast while doing their housework. So I don't know, maybe they're ambitious and they take like 2 hours to clean their house. Good for them. But so you might not want to target them, but targeting that 20-minute walk, that 30-minute commute is really
Definitely.
great because, like I said, that's realistically where your listeners are. And just make sure that whatever you're planning out is really centered around your listeners. And one last thing about in terms of the room parameters. We just blur our black background because we have a great sound editor and video editor who does that for us. But a lot of times, whoever is editing your footage will tell you that the best thing to do when you have this space that you're filming in, try to have a neutral wall behind you. And if you don't, there are backdrops you could buy on Amazon pretty cheap, like a photo backdrop to keep it nice and plain and clean and things like that. So just like I said, it depends on your sound editor, and that might not be an issue. They may be able to make it look great for you. But even if they don't, or you want to help them out further so that the video is exactly where it needs to be, get that room backdrop. Once again, it's cheap on Amazon. I think I've seen some for like $30. And
Yeah.
again, it'll last you. So that $30 for a month, a year's worth of podcasts really isn't breaking the bank. So a podcast is pretty cheap in terms of what do you need to do to put that overhead into your marketing. All right, so let's say you've done this. You've got Zoom, you've got your microphone, someone's writing your script. Okay, the next thing, how do you get listeners? How do you promote your podcast? Okay, one of the biggest things you're going to need to do is two things: social media and your existing client base. So, social media is so crucial because a lot of times people, yes, they'll search directories like Spotify and Amazon for relevant podcasts. But, a lot of people spend a lot more time perusing social media, whether they're on Facebook or LinkedIn or something like that. You need to make sure that whenever you do a show, you're promoting it on LinkedIn and Facebook. Have that sound bite, have that image from your show, have a statistic that corresponds to your show. Get someone excited or want to click on that post to make them listen. Have a teaser about the episode. Like, what's the number one legal matter clients are facing today? Tune in. What's the number one thing people are forgetting to include in their will? Tune in. So when you have those posts and those teasers, you're getting yourself out there. And again, it helps you because now you know what to post on social media because a lot of lawyers come to us telling us they have no idea what to post on social. That's there. It's easy. The content is there. And if somebody likes it, they'll listen and they'll keep looking for those social media posts. Another option is your existing clients. Obviously, have a section of your website that houses these podcasts. Far too often, our clients will come to me and tell me, oh, yeah, we have our podcast on XYZ website. Why? It should be on your own website so that if somebody's looking up your firm or they're a repeat client of yours or they just found your site, it should be right there. I always tell clients, I mean, it's great if you have it on these other websites, but it needs to be on your site. Have it
Definitely.
be a page of your blog or something like that so your existing clients will find you. And remind your past clients that it's there. So send it out in a newsletter every so often. Not so much that your clients get annoyed, but every couple months say, hey, have you listened to our podcast? It's here if you're interested. So that way, if you can help them in another legal matter, like you handle multiple practice areas, or simply it's just interesting to them, that's something that you can do to reach them.
I wanted to mention with the social media that there are so many great programs that can take a lot of the burden off of that. And I know, Nancy, you're very intimate with this. You've done a lot of research recently, and we've recently even switched up how we do it at PaperStreet. But there are programs that can spit out those sound bites and those little image grabs, and really kind of streamline that process so it's not so much of as a burden. So I think, whether it's your freelancer, your agency, you're doing it yourself. I think, there's some really great opportunities there to, kind of work that into a process that's not so time consuming. Don't get scared when we say, put it on social media, essentially.
And there are a ton of different things. You can get a tool to like translate, transcribe your podcast.
Yeah.
Like I said, I found this one using it's a program called Wave, where you can just record the sound and it'll turn it into a video file that you can share on YouTube. So, like, let's say funds really are tight and you can't handle that sound editor to do a video because video can sometimes cost more. You use a tool like Wave and you pay for that subscription, and it'll make the video for you out of whatever sound file you're using. So, like I said, there are tools out there that you can always, whether, like as Allison said, your marketing team helps suggest one, or you just play around with it yourself. I mean, that's all I did. I just was looking around one day, say, hey, what's the latest and greatest tool that we can be using for our podcasts? And like I said, there's a lot of things out there, especially because as society is becoming so technologically oriented, AI and everything, chances are there are ways out there to just make your life easier with these podcasts. And then another thing to think about with your podcast as well is it doesn't have to be a one person show or a one firm show. You don't have to just think about, oh my goodness, I'm going to be the only one talking for 12 episodes a month, a year. How am I going to do this? You can collaborate. It's a great idea to have guests. It's a great idea to have your colleagues talk about it because there's a bunch of different things that could happen. One, if you have a guest that's not related to your practice, anyone who's oriented with that guest will now listen to your show.
Right.
So, like I said, if it's a community physician and they have something to say, their patients will listen to you. And then by you in turn, you can refer patients to them. So that way everyone's benefiting by something like this. Everyone's promoting this. And it can help you stay off topic a little bit and get you a little more interested with the community, have that community feel to it. Or maybe you do one type of law and you have a colleague that does a completely unrelated area of law. Feed off each other. That way you get case referrals for each other. And that way you're both promoting the episodes. They're both available to your clientele. And that way it's just continuing to promote yourself. And again, I'm not saying promote yourself as in your podcast should be one long sales pitch. But, try to get some marketing oomph behind your podcast. Make it work for you. Make it bring home some audience members. And like I said, collaborating is a great way to do it. Have a lawyer from another state, have you guys compare so that way you're not taking each other's cases. Things like that are really great ways to make your shows more dynamic and get your word out. And then if you do have the funds, I mean, there are ways to pay to get your podcast out there. Whether you use social media boosted posts as an option, you can do episode sponsorships as an option. There are, depending on how you want to do something like this, you can keep your budget as small and tiny as you want and see how much you can grow that way. Even like it's just a host for your podcast, not like the host who talks, like the where your podcast is hosted. Some of them are free, some of them are like $12 a month. Podcasts do not have to be expensive. And then if you want to put more funds in, then put the funds into advertising your podcast or something like that. So, like I said, you can really take your podcast and really modify it, tweak it, make it work for you in a way that it'll have some sort of marketing value, even
Yeah.
beyond just getting your expertise out there.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about for, half a day's work, you can have 12 podcasts, 12 videos for YouTube, 12 transcripts for your blog, and, probably at least double, triple that in social media posts. So it's really a pretty sound investment, in your marketing strategy for a, pretty minimal time. It's a very kind of diverse avenue, if you will, that allows you to really get a lot out of, the few minutes that you're, speaking to your audience base. So it's definitely worth considering.
Absolutely. And, like Allison said, it can be posted anywhere and like over the course of time. So if you just chunk out a bunch of episodes. You can give it to your social media manager, your content manager. They can create a great content calendar for you so you can mix things up as you need to. So the earlier, the better. And like I said, if you can't do it that way, then you just have that one day a month that you set aside for this. So the 5th of every month, that's your podcast day. Whatever works for you. It's so flexible, it's so malleable, and it can air whenever you need it to. So really, it's probably one of the least hassle marketing tools you can use. And
Yeah,
again,
I
who
agree.
knows your practice area better than you? So you don't have to think about, oh, I need to reinvent the wheel or something like that. Just talk about what you know. And a lot of times that's easier for people than writing it down, because I'm always going to be the one to push that you need a blog. Okay, I will. Everyone will laugh because if I meet with my clients, they're going to hear me nagging them about the blog. But let's say that's not for you. You're just not a writer. My own husband's just not a writer. That's okay. Just talk. And it can be transcribed with those nifty tools out there. And there you go. You got some podcasts for you. And like I said, and it's promoted on your site, promoted on social, really win-win all around.
Absolutely. We look forward to
All
listening
right.
to
Well, this
them.
was one of our shorter episodes because that's how easy podcasts are. It's a great, easy way to get your brand out there. It's really not that complicated to get started, and the world is your oyster. So, thank you for listening, everybody. We hope this information was helpful. Again, we always hope you'll have PaperStreet help you with your podcast, but if not, there's plenty of great opportunities out there. Thanks for listening, everybody. Thanks for joining me, Allison. Till
Take
next
care.
time.
Bye.
Bye bye.